Maybe the Padres are just a 500 ball club. Maybe that's all they are, and we should treat them as such and talk about them as such. It's something I've pondered the last couple weeks. It's kind of been crystallized the last few days. And with Derek Togerson, we will discuss on this episode of the On Fire podcast. Derek, fresh from the clubhouse, from the dugout with Mike Schilt, joining us from the interview room. That backdrop that you see behind him is the one we are familiar with. Post game with Mike Schilt, and
I'll go ahead and just say we're winning series, darn it. This team Mike sits in right here. Like, here's the microphone and everything. Like we're winning series. Hopefully, when you sit up here, you just feel like you're compelled to say, like, I wonder if this is some sort of magic area that's been enchanted or something. That we're winning series.
I hope you don't take exception to anything that I have to say during this podcast, but we'll find out. Maybe about good 40 minutes strong, a little shorter than a typical episode. Busy day. Derek's got live hits, pregame hits out at Petco Park before they start their series with the Diamondbacks. I'm soaking up the Chucky mania. So a lot going on in San Diego. Soccer side, exciting. Baseball side leaves a little bit to be desired, and some injury updates as well that you got from Joe Musgrove. I'm sure Manny Machado was the topic of conversation. So much to get to. We will dive in. Thanks to OG's, the sponsor of the On Friar podcast. No matter what your sport, game, event of choices, Padres games, obviously. Xander Schauffele maybe going back-to-back at the Memorial Jacks tournament this weekend. NBA Finals starting, Stanley Cup Final, all types of good stuff. You want a place to watch a game, OG's is the spot to do it. Constantly updating their menu, great food items, love their pizza, and an awesome beer list. So thanks to OG's. Make sure to check them out. A bunch of locations around San Diego County. Appreciate all they do for the On Fire podcast and the NBC7 Sports Wrap team. Without further ado, the walk-up music. It is the On Fire podcast brought to you by NBC7. He is Derek Togerson. I am Darnay Tripp. Derek just had the pre-game experience after the road trip back home. What a miserable end to the road trip it was. 4 straight losses. More guys on the IL. Manny Machado limping off the field on Wednesday night in Anaheim. Not what we wanted to see. Certainly very disappointing. General vibe check there in the clubhouse. Derek, how was it?
They've won 8 of 12 series, Darnay. That's all we're going to keep saying here. Now, the problem is 3 of those series losses have been sweeps, where they've had 4 chances to sweep the other team and not been able to complete any of them. So they have not been, it's the math is weird with this team, but overall vibe check, I think nice to be back home. Let's go ahead and get right to that elephant in the room. It is Manny Machado. Manny was moving around the clubhouse a little bit. He had the hip, upper leg area, adductor, abductor, flexor, tendon, whatever it is, soft tissue injury around the hip. Was moving around the clubhouse. Didn't seem to be too bothered by it. But again, when you're just, walking around in slides, it's a little bit different than running around on a baseball field. Mike Schilt, kind of gave the anything is possible answers when asked about Manny Machado. It was anywhere from he might be able to pinch hit tonight to, well, injured list is an option, a possibility. So where we kind of left it is we're going to see what the next couple of days tell us. And then that will certainly dictate whether or not Manny is going to have any kind of injury list time. Of course, it was brought up that Manny despises the injury list. To his credit, I will always say absolutely to his credit, he hates not being on the baseball field. And I asked Schilt, do you need to kind of protect a guy like that from himself at some point? And he's like, kind of yes. That's why they took him out of the ball game on Wednesday when Manny obviously wanted to stay in the ball game. He had just hit another potential double play ball. I wanted to make up for it, right? So Schilt's like, I listen to guys, especially with that track record with veterans. I listen to them and I take into consideration what they say and how they say they're feeling. And I try to walk that line between listening to the guy and also understanding sometimes I got to shut him down for their own good. So that's kind of where they are with Manny right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. And, I
Oh,
think
he's not in the lineup on Thursday night. David Peralta is getting the DH spot.
Yeah, and Tyler Wade at third base, if I'm
Correct.
not mistaken.
And that's going to be a bit of a platoon situation with him and Donovan Solano for a while.
One of the things that it makes me think of when I talked to Greg Garcia after Mike Schilt was hired, just about Schilt and how he goes about his business. One of the things that he said is, oftentimes he'll go up to players and be like, "Hey, you're down today," or "You're down tomorrow," and they don't really have any say in the matter. And it's not to just kind of flex his muscles and that sort of thing. It's to be like, sometimes it's good to have a manager take the decision out of your hands and just say, "Okay, I think this is a good time, good opportunity to get you some rest. This is what we're going to do." Appreciate it. Enjoy having your feet up tonight. And so
you can shut down mentally that way too.
Yeah, for sure. Especially as it pertains to kind of like a DH, or not a DH, a pinch hit situation with Manny. Of course, he wanted to stay in the game last night. How much do we read into that just in terms of the severity of the injury? Again, as Manny said, I think after the game, a lot of times it's how you're feeling the next day that gives you a clear indication. And so I think not wanting to push it, probably the prudent move, in spite of, how that game went and how the series has gone. But I think just covering this team for a few years, whenever one of these kind of nagging injuries pops up, I always tend to think it's probably going to be a little bit worse than they think it is. And maybe there's been a few instances of that. Like, I don't know. You could go back to Mike Clevenger, Nelson Lamet, obviously with pitchers and elbows that can be kind of tricky. Fernando Tatis Jr. with the shoulder, so many different things have kind of popped up. Joe Musgrove having a season end early last year. I just have this kind of bit of skepticism in my mind with whatever the initial report is. I feel like if you tack on like a 30-day IL stint, then that's what it ends up being.
Yeah, that has been the history of not just this franchise, but a lot of major league franchises. Although speaking of elbows and Joe Musgrove,
real quick. There was a game that we played recently. Mm-hmm. It's my favorite game on this podcast. Has Derek Togerson had this injury? Mild to low hip flexor strain. Have you had one of those?
Yes. And I torn a hip labrum too.
Yes, you
have. And I've torn a groin, which led to an aneurysm. So it's all kinds of fun stuff.
What about bone spurs in the elbow?
No bone spurs in the elbow. That's a new one. What's weird about it is that's not so much an injury as it is a calcification of bone. It just kind of starts growing there a little bit funky. And that is what Joe says he's dealing with. He got an MRI for the first time since 2022, and they found a bone spur in there. The good news is it really does explain why he hasn't looked like Joe Musgrove yet. And it also very likely takes Tommy John off the table. So that's awesome. That is wonderful. It's great, awesome. Nothing fully structurally wrong. In fact, I talked to Mark Grant and he said he had a bone spur. He got through it, no problem. The bad news is eventually the odds are it's going to have to get cut out at some point. And with any surgery, there is a risk. You nick the UCL, that leads to a Tommy John, whatever it is. But with the bone spur it's right in a spot on the back of the elbow where, he just hasn't had the same snap on his breaking ball. Sometimes he can't extend all the way to get his arm out because it just causes too much pain. So what he did was he got one of those PRP, the platelet rich plasma injections. Hopefully what that does is he's going to shut down from throwing at all for 2 weeks. You can get that plasma in there. It starts to regenerate and it brings down the inflammation. And if the inflammation is down, Joe's hope is don't have to have surgery this year. I can get back out on the mound and be me because I'm not feeling this every time I try to throw and you just can't finish pitches. So good news that it's not the worst case scenario. Bad news in that eventually at some point he's probably going to have this done. The hope is he can get through this season and then make it an off season kind of thing. And he doesn't miss substantial amounts of time.
Yeah. And I saw a tweet from Dennis Lin and you were kind of talking about, the decision, do you go surgery? Do you not go surgery? And you kind of touched on it. Musgrove said something along the lines of like, he's heard about guys, or maybe it was you, Darvish, said something along the lines of they've heard about guys who have gotten the procedure done, and that leads then to the UCL or the Tommy John procedure. And sometimes you're better off just kind of giving it some rest and giving it some time.
Yep. Exactly. That's what Joe said too, is that he's done a lot of research on this. Second he found out about it, he started researching it. And he said that, I mean, it's no walk in the park. You know, it can lead to something else if you have that kind of a procedure done. Again, it's because anytime you have, again, a procedure done like that, you're invasive, you scar tissue forms, you try and get around it, and you harm the UCL. Any number of things could possibly happen. So hopefully this just kind of gets to the point where he can manage it and not feel it anymore, and then have something done when it's safe to do such.
Yeah. And you know, Joe's a worker, Joe's a tinkerer. Joe puts a lot of thought into these things, maybe to a fault. I mean, he even admitted kind of back in spring training, like, I probably pushed it a little too much, and that might have led to kind of the domino effect of injuries that cut short his season last year. And so I think it's kind of towing that line between being aggressive and being proactive, and also just kind of getting the rest. And that seems to be the difference this time around, compared to his previous IL stint, where it sounds like they're doing like the hard reset shutdown for a little while, and then kind of building back up, right?
Yeah, well, that's when you get one of those injections, you need to give it time to work, because it's more or less just it's trying to help your body regenerate in a new way and really help the healing process. So if you're breaking it down with movement, it negates the entire purpose of what you're putting that stuff in there for. So that's what's interesting, is the most painful look on his face is when he was like, I can't throw for 2 weeks. Like he wants to have a baseball in his hands so badly, but he knows he has to do it, because if you go and get a procedure like that and you 5 days later start picking the ball up and throwing around, you just ruined all the work that you're trying to get done. I think he understands that. It certainly does not make it easy for him.
Yeah. Did Manny talk? Did I miss that?
Manny did not talk. No.
Manny did not talk. Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah, obviously from the rotation, huge bummer. See more Randy Vasquez, Thursday in the opener. Did Adam Mazur come up, and the plans for him?
To Adam Mazur, yes.
Okay. And, how that pertains to this situation, and Joe Musgrove, being out for a stretch, and he obviously showed up and pitched well in his debut.
Well, it's more right now. It's more of a Yu Darvish situation. Did get an update on Yu. The hamstring is progressing, but he is not yet full blown throwing. So he's not on his, regular ramp up when he's coming back or something like that. Basically not able to fully extend and throw off a mound yet, but he is getting better. Adam Mazur and Randy Vasquez, of course, Mazur's up for Darvish. Vasquez is up for Musgrove. Which my read on it, and this was not asked directly of Schulte, my read on it is whichever one of these guys is throwing better when Yu comes back probably stays in the rotation. And then because Joe, we know, is gone for at least 2 weeks. That's three starts at least. So probably need both of them for at least a couple more turns through the rotation. And it was a good kid. He seemed like a real good egg. Just talked about what it was like for him leading up to that start, what he learned from that start. And he's like, it really took me like basically the end of the second, early third innings, and I kind of like really felt comfortable. And he said what everybody always says, and I always love these stories. After that, I realized I'm just playing baseball like I've always done. It's just in a much larger stadium with a lot more people watching, and a much better defense behind me. Seems like the kid, obviously the stuff is really good. And I asked him if he had anything else he could start when all that tape is out on him that everybody sees now, and they'll get more of it with his next start. Does he have something else he can go to when they start making adjustments to him so we can adjust right back? And he's like, I just, when I see how they're trying to attack me, I'll be able to work around that. But also, I'm not going away from who I am. I'm going to keep doing the stuff that got me here in the first place. So seems like he's got a really good head on his shoulders. He was a Big Ten pitcher of the year at Iowa for a reason. The kid he knows how to pitch, and he's got really good stuff. So I think his first start was very impressive. 6 innings of 1-run ball. That was pretty cool to see him. And I did ask him too, by the way, he's going to get a start at home next against the Diamondbacks. I said, you've heard these guys talk about this ballpark, right? He's like, oh, I can't wait. I just can't wait. Like being in that environment with this kind of place, he said, it's going to be electric.
I would think weeknight in Anaheim is probably a good way to kind of ease yourself in
Yeah.
rather than like a weekend
Without Mike
at
Trout in the
Petco
lineup.
Park.
Yeah, exactly.
And he did very well for himself. Did you catch any of the Garrett Crochet scuttlebutt earlier this week? AJ Preller perhaps dialing up the White Sox again to maybe fill another spot in the rotation. In this case, with the lefty, we know they're short on lefties, at least in the rotation. A guy that's got a little bit of control to him, maybe some kind of health concerns, that sort of thing. Upside is there, cost low, but do we want to continue to empty out the farm system? I struggle with this because, like, before Cease, I was like, I don't know if they should do that. And then Luis Arraez trade, I'm like, all right, well, who'd they give up? But now if you ask me on the spot, I'd need a second to remember exactly who they gave up in both those trades. And so maybe it's not quite as important.
Go is not right at the top.
No, not at all. But I part of me is at the point where it's like, maybe we do kind of ride with some of these guys and see who they have rather than continuing to dwindle the stock that we do have, because there's been times where that has hurt them in the long run. And then the question that I'm always concerned about is, like, can you keep Dylan Cease past 25? Can you keep Luis Arraez past 25? Because that's when it can start to hurt you. So I do get a little concerned about kind of some of these Band-Aid trades where you're, another problem to fix. Let's throw some more prospects at it. And those things, like, I thought before the season, Padres roughly a 500 team. Then they added a Cy Young caliber pitcher. Then they added a prolific hitter, batting champ, and here they are, roughly a 500 team. So it makes me a little hesitant to swing another one of these types of trades.
I can see that. Crochet, however, this kid is freaking good, dude. He got up to a little bit of a rough start. I'm looking at his game logs right now. A little bit of a rough start, but then when the calendar turned to May, how about this? He has now, in his last 6 starts, 35 innings, 4 runs allowed. He's good. I would take that on my club. 211 strikeout performances. The stuff is there, man, and it's from the left side. Now, here's the question. As you know, the White Sox obviously are very well versed in the Padres farm system. They have been looking at it for quite some time now. They've gotten several pieces out of it. Is there more there that they would want? I don't know. Is Adam Mazur one of those guys who maybe if you want to go conspiracy theory here, the reason they brought him up is to show the White Sox what he looks like on a major league mound and then ship him off for Garrett Crochet? I don't know. There are a lot of different options we could possibly talk about here. It would be interesting. It'd be really interesting to see that guy with that kind of stuff from the left side come over here, because he's really, really, really good. And I'd not caught wind of that. The White Sox are in full-blown sell mode, as you know. They're in an absolute rebuild, as they should be. Is anybody else going to come up? Because, the Padres probably not going to touch their top 3 to 4 prospects. Ethan Salas ain't going nowhere. We know Dylan Lesko ain't going nowhere. Robbie Snelling's sticking. We know the guys. Is there enough past that the White Sox can be enticed by to give up a guy like that? That depends on their front office, and I honestly don't know. Or will somebody else come in and say we need him more and make an even better offer? That's what you're always looking at too. So, is it possible? With AJ, anything's possible. And I would, if the cost is not too great, absolutely bring that monster into this rotation.
Yeah, and you got to figure if he's available, other teams are going to come calling as well. So you have to kind of deal with the bidding war, so to speak. You mentioned Snelling and Lesko. If I'm the White Sox, already swung one trade. The talent is a little bit dwindled because there is obviously the Arraez trade that came since the Dylan Cease trade. Has some of the shine worn off of him? I mean, it's obviously too early, but Robbie Snelling hasn't had a great 5.14 ERA in 9 appearances. Strikeout rate is lower than it was. Guys hitting 281 off of him, a 1.5+ whip. Dylan Lesko, 6+ ERA in 9 appearances. Strikeouts lower, 1.62 whip. Guys are only hitting 200 off of him.
It's walks for Lesko. Yeah. He's been a walk machine, which is, again, to be expected coming off of Tommy John. This is his first full season coming back, and control usually is an issue. I think This is maybe a little alarming. The control has been this bad. Snelling is a 20-year-old in the Texas League.
Yeah.
The average age of Texas leaguers is 23 and a half. So he is playing way above where he should be playing right now. We just got used to seeing him being so dominant last year that we're kind of going, what the heck is going on with Robbie? This is one, and you see this with players sometimes. They take a step up really fast, and then they have a little bit of success, and then they're back in that level full-time the next year, and everything catches up to them. I'm not concerned about Robbie Snelling by any stretch of the imagination. I think next year, he'll probably go right back to Double-A, and he'll dominate just like we were expecting him to. Still, as one of the younger players in the Texas League.
Here's the thing: going back to the Crochet discussion and how good he is, and what in addition he would be to the rotation. And obviously, your rotation can never be too good. But in this 4-game skid, quality start from Michael King, quality start from Matt Waldron, quality start from Adam Major, and quality start from did I say Dylan Cease? Did I miss somebody? I don't think I said.
Cease,
yeah. So 4 quality starts, 4 losses.
The offense has scored 2 runs a game.
Yeah. Out hit the opposition every single game. I think it was like a 31-22 advantage over the course of the 4-game skid, 2 runs a game. So it's, again, that's part of why I'm hesitant. It's not just that simple as throwing a Band-Aid over a spot in the rotation, because even when the rotation has been really, really good, now obviously you hope that'll correct itself, and the more quality pitching you have, the more opportunities you're going to have to win games. But it just never seems that simple with this team. Got a hole in the rotation, fill that hole. Everything's going to be fine. Not necessarily.
You're robbing Peter to pay Paul at that point. It's had they scored a few more runs, and by the way, they would have scored a few more runs had they not had some terrible base running decisions, which has kind of become it really. And Schulte even talked about it. It was, Anaheim. We had some bad base running. They're trying to be aggressive, and they're not going to try and fault guys for that. But I think they probably dial that back a little bit, because this offense leads the league in singles. They've shown time and time again they can string hits together in this lineup. So I think you might see them start to go, right, let's walk this back a little bit with the overly aggressive base running, because we can rely on guys now to get more base hits instead of running ourselves out of innings. We're hitting better with runners in scoring position. Let's lead runners in scoring position and not push it quite as much as we should. And Yuki Matsui is a disaster right now. There's no other way around it. He's been bad for a little while. So until he finds his way back, it's another hole in that bullpen that we have kind of been fearing.
Yes.
And Stephen Kolek has not helped either.
No, he's not. Yeah, and then the whole weekend, just kind of the domino effect of having to use Kolek not being effective, then having to use Suarez. Also, what did Estrada one night threw like 6 pitches, Peralta threw like 3 pitches, could have gone in to start the 9th. Maybe you have to bring in Robert Suarez midway through the inning, you burn him one way or another, but like maybe you give Peralta a shot to get out of that on Saturday and save one of your top arms for the series finale. There's a lot of questions, but
that's also the trickle down effect of a Crochet trade, because Darvish comes back. Okay, now you've got room in your bullpen. Well, Randy Vasquez with the Yankees threw really well out of the bullpen. So he's a guy you can he's not going to have room for him in the rotation. Well, you can stick him in the bullpen immediately, and there's another high quality arm with some real stuff that you can use in a spot where maybe get rid of, maybe Kolek goes through the waiver wire, and all of a sudden you've strengthened your rotation and your bullpen. That's the kind of domino effect we might see with a deal like that.
How was Schulte today? Did he get any of those big picture doom and gloom questions that make him get a little bristly with the media?
No, not so. I asked him about the base running, and he was actually, I think he was kind of cool with it. He's like, yeah, listen, like we're not going to walk it back or anything. Like, we're not going to fault guys for being aggressive, but we're, sometimes we got to be maybe a little bit smarter or not be quite as aggressive. And he said it's the case by case basis thing. So didn't fully answer the question. But no, he was fine today. He got asked a couple things like, what's wrong with the offense? And he just said, hey, we're scoring 2 runs a game. We got to find ways to get back on track to where we were early in the year. And then in true eternal optimist Mike Schulte manner, he's like, listen, our pitching's been really good. To your point, Darnay, you just said pitching's been really good lately. If we can get our offense back to where it was a week ago with our pitching, we're going to be great. And he's probably right about that.
Sorry, I was looking up a tweet from Cameron Maven. There's a few questions from Pedro Rosario on the chat, and if
Hey,
you are
Pedro, what's going
watching
on?
live on YouTube, get in the chat. Let us know what you think. Love to include your comments on the pod. Do you guys, as SD Media, feel you should ask the hardest questions or feel a need to hold back since this is the only pro sports team in town and tiptoe eggshells around the stars? Well, Derek is not a tiptoeing type. I
No.
think this is also a reference in point to the Matt Kemp clip. Did you see that floating around? He was on a podcast this week and basically said when he got to San Diego, like it was too chill. He was playing terrible, but he was just kind of sitting in front of his locker and nobody's bothering him. And he needed somebody to light him up and he needed the media to ask tough questions. And so he was excited to get out of there and go to Atlanta, where they challenge him a little bit and are a little bit tougher on him. And so,
Matt, if you need the media to fire you up, you're a douche.
exactly. Yeah.
Good Lord. Do you blame anything for anybody? What happened was he got to Atlanta and got back on the steroids. So, there's that. Allegedly. No, it's Pedro, to your point. If you saw me around the Chargers when they were here, I said I'm not a tiptoeer by any stretch. I don't ever feel like we have to bow down to anyone in town for lack of access or anything. One, this franchise is really good about understanding that. I know Eric Grupner fairly well, and he's never got a problem with just as long as you're being respectful about it, asking questions that need to be asked. And sometimes, like, he didn't want it. Do you like being asked those questions? No, but you also understand that they have to come because it is what people are wondering about. So there's never any feeling to hold back because of a pro sports team in town. Sometimes you have to understand the moment and know that, okay, am I going to ask something because this happened twice in a row over a 162 game season? Probably not. If we get a week into something, then yes, you need to go, all right, guys, what the hell is going on here? So kind of understanding the ebb and flow of a season and seeing if there's something truly is a trend or if someone's just having a bad run of something. That's when you kind of have to understand when and how to ask a lot of these questions. And sometimes you get to know the guys a little bit and they understand you're not malicious in what you're doing. You have to do what you're doing. If you come at it, like I worked in Philadelphia, those guys are malicious about when they ask these types of questions because that's what you, and Darnay, you're from there. You have to make a name for yourself by being an a-hole. So that's like the extreme version of it. It's never like that. It's never like I'm going to try and get a reaction out of you. It is, I have to ask this because it's happening and neither one of us wants to talk about it because we wish it wasn't happening, but now we're here. So let's get through it together.
The thing with Schilt is I don't know that he's necessarily realized that. And he's gotten some of these hard questions and it's like he's surprised by it or doesn't understand it. And it seems to get under his skin a little bit. And that's what's kind of, I found to be a little bit strange. AJ Preller's had to answer a bunch of tough questions, especially in the last year or so. Yeah. And, he doesn't necessarily seem fazed when that's the case. Manny Machado at points when he's struggled, he's had to stare down the bullets. Xander Bogaerts is probably as good as anybody at doing that. The Cameron Maben tweet, this is from April. And he's talking about Juan Soto having success in New York and it being a more demanding media market. He said, in San Diego, if you struggle as a player, nobody's booing you. Not the case now. I mean, we've talked about them getting booed. Nobody's telling you you're trash, you should die. And he was talking about when he played in New York, there was that expectation if he's not locked in, the fan base is going to let him hear about it. I feel like some of these opinions aren't necessarily like, the media, they do ask the tough questions. I think there's this idea that the fan base has that that's not the case. I do think that's the case. And as we've seen, this fan base lives and dies by it. And they will let you know when things aren't going particularly well. And that's happened at points this season. So I think Matt and Cameron may be, a little bit off in their assessment.
Cam was here in 2012. Okay. The franchise was a laughing stock in 2012. There were no expectations from the fans because there was no expectation from Jeff Morad. There was no expectation from the ownership group. The ownership group wasn't trying. So the Padres fans came here because the ballpark was cool and the food was good. Now there are expectations. Guess what? Okay, come back and play here now. Now we'll see if anybody's going to boo you because now there are expectations because the franchise looks like it's trying. Back then, the franchise didn't even look like it was trying. So why do we care if we got, a bunch of dudes out there who wouldn't even be in AAA in another organization, but they're at the major league level here? Why would we think there's anything even close to resembling an expectation? Why would we care when we know you're not better than that? We boo you because you're not performing as well as we know you can perform, right? Nobody ever expected Cameron Maybin to hit 250. That's what's going on here.
Well, and that's a great segue to kind of think the overarching question with this episode and where the Padres are at this point is this just a 500 team? And do we need to just talk about them as a 500 team and not be surprised when they get swept by the Angels, that get swept by the Rockies?
Oh, no, you can be surprised when they get swept by a team that coming into the series was 17 games under 500.
And not be
surprised. You can be pissed about that too, which I am.
Yeah, and not be surprised by the inconsistency and the lapses and all of that, because even though they've won at one point before this series, 8 out of 10 series, you still look at them and they're 2 games above 500, and so despite the upward trajectory that Mike Shildt seemed to indicate this club was on, here they are now back below 500, and all those series that they won did very little to kind of swing things in their favor and put them in a position where they're on solid footing in the standings. They're in the last spot in the playoffs and the one team that has a below 500 record. And if one of those teams like the Cubs or the Nats or any of those squads, the Giants, get hot, then the Padres could be in trouble, like they were in 2021 when Mike Shilt's Cardinals team went on a tear. And so, they're not doing anything to really put themselves on solid footing. And I think the longer we go, the more it just looks like, well, what are we doing all this belly aching about? This is probably just who they are. We expect them to be maybe like a 85, 86 win team going into the year, maybe after the Dylan Cease trade. But the inconsistencies continue to be there. They can't hit off lefties. They can't win at home, especially in night games. They can't win a series, or they can't sweep a series.
They can't
injury
beat bad
issues.
Teams.
Bullpen is spotty outside of Jeremiah Estrada and Robert Suarez. They can't beat bad teams. I think it's 11-18 against teams with a sub 500 record after last night. Maybe this is just, and I don't want this to be the case, maybe this is just who they are. I think, excuse me, on a positive side, what we saw last year is like a good couple of weeks can swing it. And if they remain a 500 team through the rest of the season and the National League continues to flounder, then hey, have a good week or two and you're in the postseason. So, I mean, that's the bright side of the situation. But, I think because we've expected a contender, because of the star power, because of the NLCS visit, playoff appearances in 2 out of 3 years, we've viewed them as this contending type team. We've talked about them as a contending type team. And maybe we're just kind of hoping for more than we have reason to kind of believe in.
Well, this is where I have hope. Two reasons. One, do you know how many teams in the National League right now are over 500?
4 or 5?
4. And the Cubs are at 500. 4 teams in the National League are over 500, and one is at it. As we record this at 5:43 Pacific time on Thursday night.
Last year,
9.
Many.
Last year 9. See, it's different. It's very, very different. Last year, 84 wins got you to the World Series in the National League. And the other part of that is, as we've seen, Mike Shilt's teams get better as the season goes on. And if they are able to sneak in, they're 17-13 against teams with winning records. They've won a series in Atlanta. They've taken 2 series from the Dodgers. Like this, for whatever inexplicable, stupid reason, this team, maybe it's just who they are. They play to the level of their competition, meaning they go a little bit above with good teams and they drop a little bit below with bad teams, but they play right to wherever they're supposed to be. So if they get in, it's nothing but good teams in the playoffs. So if that trend continues, this team could make serious hay if they get into October baseball. Adding Garrett Crochet would help a lot. I would be happy about that. So I don't know, man. It's going to be it's weird because AJ's got moves coming. You just do. That hopefully Manny stays is able to get healthy and then stays on a hot trajectory. Tatis is swinging the bat great right now. His leg kick is back. He's finally found himself being back on time. Jurickson Profar looks like he's going to continue to play extremely well. Jackson Merrill has been kind of treading water here as a 270 hitter, as a 2021-year-old. I'll take that in the bottom part of my order all day. Ha-seong Kim's taking better swings. Defensively, they've been better. I mean, I'm liking what I'm seeing. Luis Arraez is a freaking monster. I mean, even George Brett during that Royal Series is like, God, that guy rakes. I mean, George Brett was raving about Luis Arraez. George Brett hit 390 one year and won an MVP award. The only player in Royals history ever to win an MVP, by the way. Although Salvador Perez should have one by now. Darn, he's never finished higher than 7th. That's weird. There's a lot going right for this team, and I feel like as they continue to figure each other out, it's probably going to trend upwards. The one thing I don't get is it's the record against bad teams. They're 15-20 against teams of 500 or losing records. I don't understand, aren't I? The math doesn't add up.
For a while, I was like, man, Derek's being really positive, really optimistic. And then I saw the backdrop. I was like, oh, he's got some of that Mike Schilt energy behind him.
Yeah, it's weird. I can feel it. It's like pervasive. Penetrated by like the Schilty positivity. Yeah, it's weird. It's kind of weird.
One thing I never want to hear is, oh yeah, this is a stretch of games. The Padres should get some wins. They should do really well here. The schedule stacks up favorably for them.
Yeah.
Never again. Never, ever again. Unless maybe they're playing like the Dodgers and the Braves or something like that. I never want to hear that again. Oh, they've got the Rockies and the Angels and the A's coming to town. Oh yeah, they're going to feast. This is going to be a good stretch for them, a chance to get comfortably. Let's never say that again, because they've never proven the ability to really take advantage of a stretch like that and to play to the level you would expect them to expect a team of that caliber and talent, a team that has beaten the Dodgers, that has beaten the Braves, that has beaten these good teams. You would think that they could handle business against the Rockies and some of these kind of lower tier cellar dweller type clubs. They haven't done it. So let's never again say, oh yeah, the schedule's favorable for the Padres, because they haven't earned that sort of favor or that sort of optimism.
I'm terrified of this homestand, Darnay. It's 4 against Arizona and 3 against Oakland. This could be a 1-6 homestand.
And then they're going to the Mets. At least they're going on the road. So that's
and they have 3 in Philadelphia after that. So that's awesome.
Well, we'll see. It wasn't so awesome last time. Pedro also saying, is it fair to say we need a quality win streak, say 6 to 10 games, to get over the hump of a roller coaster season? What you say, Togi and Trippy? And I say, yeah. I mean, if they can do that, that would be enormous, because they and then not follow that up with a 3-game sweep against whatever lousy team, fill in the blank, because they tend to just kind of trade wins for losses otherwise. So if you could rattle off 8 straight and then just continue to play 500 ball, maybe you get swept here or there, maybe you win 6 of 8, that sort of thing. That might be enough just to, okay, this could be an 85-win team. This could be an 86-win team, just off the strength of one good, 2-week stretch.
Pedro, I see where you're going with that, and I would usually say yes, except I'm still scarred by the 9-game winning streak in 2021 that meant absolutely nothing to the grand scheme of things. Now, granted, different skipper, different team, different rotation, everybody got hurt, different trade. I get it. That specter is kind of still in the back of my head. It would, given the fact, Darnay, I agree with what you said, the fact that they've been able to kind of stay right around 500 for most of that time. If they won 9 in a row and they play 500 ball the rest of the year, guess what? They're 9 games over 500, and that probably gets them in the playoffs. So that would certainly go a long way to do. I'm not going to say it would be the catch-all, but damn, I'm going to put them in the catbird seat, especially in a very, very, I don't want to say mediocre National League, but in a very, very plagued by parity National League.
Yeah. What does give me hope as we wind down is they have responded. I mean, they lost 3 straight, Milwaukee, 2 to Toronto, then they won 3 of 4. Now they should have won, 4 of 5, but they let that one against the Rockies go. That led to another skid. They lost 5 straight, turned around with that series sweep against the Phillies, turned around, won 4 in a row against the Reds and Arizona. And that's kind of when the turnaround started, when they were winning series. Even when they got swept by the Rockies, turn around, they go to Atlanta. You're like, oh, this could be a dangerous situation. They win the first 3 of 4 against the Braves. And so the one of the feathers in the cap of this team is their ability to kind of respond when it looks like they're in a really tough spot, low point of the season. They've rallied and all of a sudden flipped a switch and looked really good. And so I think that's where you can be a little hopeful going into now this stretch back at home.
Yeah. Actually, Pedro, this is a very good point. Pedro's basically producing our show right now. Oh, hi, Fernando. You're here too. Fernando Ramirez, everybody. Would you list some top farm pieces for Mason Miller of the A's? Go, considering Suarez's injury past. No. I would want Mason Miller just because he's Mason Miller.
That's not a reason to pull off that trade. You have Suarez and Estrada. No,
Mason. Have you seen 103 in person?
No.
It's a sight, man. It is. Suarez is going to be okay. I think he's going to have some fluky kind of stuff. And he certainly has not taken a step back this year by any stretch of the imagination. Estrada has been amazing. The chitter is a great pitch. The fastball is real. I love that guy. Again, he's basically a rookie. So you don't know what's sustainability with that looks like. But if you can add a dude like Miller, who was basically like he's Cirque du Soleil, man. He's like it's a thing you just don't. It looks different than everything else.
Yeah.
If you could get that dude, and get him away from the A's for not that much, man, I'd take that dude in my bullpen in a heartbeat. Because you want to talk about being him. Hey, Robert, you know what? You've been up for 2 days now. We're good. It's okay. We got another dude coming in here who's going to go to the All-Star games or the best closers in baseball. You got those 3 arms at the back end of your bullpen. You know what it's like, Darnay? 2022, when it was good Luis Garcia, Robert Suarez, and Josh Hader all throwing 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And they went to the NLCS. So I would Mace, dude, bring that dude. Plus, he comes in to Don't Fear the Reaper. Like, come on. That's a great entry song for a closer.
You made my point for me. You got Luis Garcia for cheap to be your 7th inning guy. Get somebody else for cheap to be your 7th inning guy. That's where
Mason Miller's cheap.
Yeah, sure. Well, we might get a chance to see 103 in person in the next week. All right, we got to go. I got some Chucky Lozano to talk about. You got some Padres pregame live hits to do. But appreciate the intel from the clubhouse. Enjoyed getting that, and hopefully they can turn things around. Bounce back this week. Get on a good plane, go into New York, do some damage there. I'm not going to say that this is a stretch they should do well in because we've learned our lessons, but fingers crossed.
This is a stretch that we are hopeful they will be able to win several games in, but we do not have empirical evidence to show us that is going to happen.
Nope. All right. Thanks, everybody.
It's all circumstantial, darn it. It's like I did jury duty recently and ended up on jury. I'm like, circumstantial evidence would show us that
we need more than that.
Yeah,
that's
wild.
That's not going to convince the jury. We need a lot more than that.
We cannot convict Mike Schilt either way. Man.
Thanks, everybody.